Welcome to the Meta, an Apex Legends competitive podcast. I'm your host, Burke, and today joining me is Donny from the Apex, the podcast. And today we're going to be going through all of the teams going into champs. We're going to talk about the POI draft that just happened and finally kind of come to a conclusion of where we think these teams are going to place in the tournament coming up. So if you want to know a little bit more about the teams that are going into champs and just know what to expect, this is the place. So Donny, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Decided to talk a little Apex as always, and decided to get into it. So let's do it.
I mean, we're always talking shop elsewhere,
Oh
and so
yeah,
it's good to finally have you on and get to talk about this. We don't want to waste too
absolutely.
much time.
Appreciate
That
it.
way, you guys can get going with your day. But I want to start. We're just going to go through each of the groups, the POI draft, mainly looking for was there a winner, a clear winner, and were there any losers in this draft? We obviously watched this together somewhat. I watched it a little bit behind you, but overall, just before we jump into the specifics, were there any big standouts for you in the draft or anything about the format? I mean, I noticed they changed some of the drop spots, which was one big thing that I noticed.
Yeah, I think the way that they updated some of the drop spots, I think just made things a little bit cleaner because I think, with us especially kind of having studied some of the POIs that were being selected, there was definitely kind of the same five or six or so that weren't getting picked a lot. So I think kind of just trimming the fat a little bit of those POIs that kind of weren't really necessary and, kind of getting us to more of like a draft that okay, there's only so many spots that matter. So what are the decisions that these teams have to make? And I think an interesting thing was that it really seemed like Storm Point was the main one that teams targeted first. That's where a lot of these high tier picks went towards, and then it kind of ended up going towards E District second, and then World's Edge last. Which I'm interested if it's just because World's Edge has been the longest going map that maybe that's why they waited for last because everyone kind of has the strategies of how you play out World's Edge. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like for World's Edge, I do agree part of it is like familiarity. I also think that there are more better POIs on World's Edge, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of POIs that people just know the ins and outs. They don't have to worry about it versus I think there's a little bit more to deal with on Stormpoint. Like if you look at Stormpoint, you have the verticality of the map and that can influence a lot. You have trident placement, you have a lot of things that are rotational tools, especially in the current meta, which is a big thing I've noticed and I kind of like is as much as I was against the Pathfinder nerf in a lot of ways, this is one of the first metas we've had in a while. At least I feel like since Pathfinder came back in, that we really don't have a whole lot of movement in this
Mm-hmm.
in the kit. So really, people are they're taking the trek, right?
Yeah.
They're rotating via like running to locations. Obviously, if they have tridents, they have jump pads, or not jump pads, tridents, balloons and stuff like that to get them around. But at the end of the day, they're trekking it a little bit, and so I think even more so now, Stormpoint has this verticality to it that's going to be harder to overhaul when they're not running those legends. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think that in terms of E District, the fact that E District only has 20 POIs makes it a little bit more. If people are jumping on that, then you're going to be inclined to be picking E District before anything else, just because if you see POI starting to go, you do not want to wait around everyone else full pick E District, and now you have one of the. I mean, I'll look here. I mean, you have one of these three that you just don't want to have. Vibe Isle, cool name, bad spot, settlement, Canal Plaza. These places you don't want to be. And
Yeah.
if you are letting yourself, letting it go for a round when you've seen people buy into this E District, then you're going to miss out. And I think we saw a lot of that where the rounds where once someone started picking E District, we saw them start to go a lot faster. Whereas otherwise, people were trying to get their preferred picks on Stormpoint, which I think I've always felt is one of the maps that you see a lot more variability in performance on. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
having a good POI is pretty important there. Um, so going into the thing, I'm look here, and we obviously this website has been a wonder. We have
Absolutely. Shout out to the
algs.ea.com.
team real quick
Yeah,
that absolutely overhauled this because it
it's
looks so
insane.
much cleaner. And for nerds like us that look into this stuff, it's just perfect. So like shout out to Shaheen and the team
Yep.
that put this together. So
And I will link this below if you want to like follow along or just check it out after. It does have all of the POI drafts. It looks like it's also going to be updating the scoring, and it'll also have the POI drafts during champs. So if you want to see the ones that are like happening going into the bracket stages and into the finals, you're gonna be able to see that there. So this is an amazing thing. You saw it updating live. You could follow along with it. Really, really cool to see this be here. Again, I will link it down. We're gonna go through each of the groups. There were 6 groups: A versus B, C, D. Onward. There were 4 groups,
yeah.
and obviously there was 3 of each of them gets 3 drafts. So we're gonna go through each. We're gonna start the left to right. A to B was the first one to go. I can show you. You can see it here. I'll actually let me move this a little bit so you can see all of the specific POIs. I can scroll through this a little bit as well. Just looking at you can see my screen, I believe, right? You can see all these.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, just looking at this actually might be a little bit better in terms of like seeing all the individual POIs. We can go into the maps. But looking at this right here, any clear winners for A versus B? Obviously, for this group, we have some big hitters. We got Moist, we got TSM, we got Guild, which Guild now has Phony over there, and that's an APAC South team. And then we have Fnatic, we have Cloud9. We have a lot of big teams here, but specifically, I believe it was Moist got the first round pick, right? In
Yes.
this, so let me see if there's a way to. I don't see it, so we'll just go from here. Who do you think like stand out? 1 or 2 teams that you feel like they really just nailed this draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think we obviously could go into the obvious ones, but I think probably to save ourselves some time, we don't really need to go too much into it
Yeah.
because a lot of those picks were kind of like, no shit. That's kind of what you
Yeah,
need to go with. Like the Moist of the world, the Fanatics, I think they got a lot of very strong POIs.
Yep.
Moist especially getting Skylook West and Launchpad. Those are 2 definitely big top tier POIs that teams love to play out of that tend to have a lot of success from. Obviously, those teams that usually play from those are the better teams, but Launchpad has been a POI that since Stormpoint's been around, outside of like the Mills of the world, it's been one that it's kind of not a lot of people necessarily talk about at first, but when you actually play out of it, you realize the loot's usually pretty good. You get a lot of, I believe there's a spider nest you get out of there. Usually you get at least one sort of beacon to scan from there. So it's a lot of really good information you can get, and the rotates are pretty nice because if you have to go to like the elevation more up north, it's a pretty decent rotate on that right side where you don't have too much traffic. Or if it's more towards the center, it's not too far of a rotate. But moving to a team that I'm actually really interested to see is Cloud9. I really think based on how they play and how they will see the game, how they want to quick rotate, they want to get to that what they think is God spot early, and avoid a lot of the traffic of other teams. I think they did a really good job of getting a lot of either a really powerful POI or a very central POI. Whereas on Stormpoint they got Cedo Station, which is definitely heralded as a very good POI to rotate from. Again, good loot, can get a lot of information from there, and you can get to a lot of different spots on the map very quickly. Electro Dam, the nice thing about E-District is that we really don't have too much information about how this stuff plays out. But based on what we've seen, Electro Dam has been a very top tier POI that a lot of good teams would perform from. So that'll be another good POI that they got on E-District. And then Tree, I think Tree for your 3rd pick is actually really solid. Because, I mean, again, it's obviously you're not going to get your best POI that you want from your 3rd pick as the 46th overall. But I think getting Tree of all places, one, we've seen a lot of zones go there recently. And if it doesn't go there, ends up just in front of them, on Siphon, kind of by the train tracks in between Siphon and Harvester. There's a lot of the end games that go there. So I think they did a really good job for that 3rd POI because I think that's really going to make the difference for a lot of these teams is what that 3rd one was. And to get Tree out of that, again, a very high performing POI, I think they absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's some teams on here that have like I think the key to a good draft, in my opinion, is that third pick. I think, do you get
Yeah.
3 maps that you can be good on? Obviously, like, getting a Skyhook West, like Moist, right? That's going to be great. But at the end of the day, if you're playing, if your third map, if, one out of the 3 maps you just can't do anything out of, you're going to be struggling. I don't think Boardwalk's the worst thing ever. I don't think it's a great POI, but I don't think it's going to be too bad. And with Sky West and Launchpad's pretty solid, I definitely don't think you're going to have too many issues from Moist in terms of POIs. I think that's pretty good. Some of the ones that really stuck out to me were Oblivion and 100 Thieves, and specifically, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit. I was talking with you, I was talking with Jayhawk, and one of the biggest things that we were discussing was the change that they made to the drop spots, and part of that was that they removed a lot of these contest spots or places where you could land on one side, and basically the threat of you landing there would serve as a negotiation chip to force people out from drafting it themselves or drafting the other one. So you can save that for round 3, and you're going to get what you want. And they got rid of the one on Lava Siphon, which I think was a really good choice. They got rid of the one on Climatizer, which I think I go 50-50. I think it was big enough to split, but I personally don't mind having the lack of the contests. It's to each their own with that one. As for the one that's still remaining, that I think is arguably the worst one, I mean, it's definitely the worst one still around, is Trident and Northpad specifically. And I will pull up the map just so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. We have on the map, now let me move around. We have Northpad here at Storm Point, and we have Trident right below it. And what people will do, 100 Thieves specifically and Alliance, is they will claim, they will threaten to land on Trident if a team lands Northpad. They're going to land on either of the two, but if you land on Northpad, they're for sure going to land on Trident in their round 3 pick, and they're going to fight you, or at the very least make it really annoying for you. And so 100 Thieves has used this as a strategy. This has been something going on for a long time for them, for specifically Timmy and Design. They've been running this strategy for a while, since the beginning of the POI draft, and so has Alliance. And it works out a good amount of times. When we talk about Alliance later, we'll get more into that. This time it didn't. And one of the things is you kind of have to decide, are you going to stand on business? Because at the end of the day, the threat's only as good as what you make it out to be. And Oblivion decided, we're going to challenge you here. So what we see here is, everyone waited and no one took their picks. And so, obviously both are available because of 100 Thieves threat. Everyone else takes them seriously. They've practiced on other POIs because it happens in scrims as well. We get Thermal Station. They get Thermal Station City Hall, both great POIs. Thermal Station, obviously, 100 Thieves. This is Design's, home. They say he owns the deed. And so this is good to see them get that. And then they take Trident. And then we see Oblivion go down here. And obviously you can see it right here. They get it on their 60th pick. They decide, you know what? We're doing it. I don't like the other options nearly as good. I don't want to land Cliffside. I don't want to land, what is it, the Lift or Bean? And they decide to go there. And it's going to make for some interesting content. It'll be a good time. We'll see if, they make do on their promise that you'll regret landing there. So those are the two most interesting to me. But I do agree. I really think Cloud9 is probably the, for not having a first or second pick, I would say they would probably be my winners of this draft. I like TSMs as well. Mirage has moved up on a lot of people's opinions. It used to be really hated. It's still not like preferred, but apparently, the court of public opinion is in favor of Mirage over staging, and so which makes sense. But so we've talked specifically about who we think did really well with this draft, but who do you think are like the losers of this draft? Obviously, somebody's got to get the worst POIs. Somebody's got to be there. Do you think there's a specific team or maybe two teams that didn't really do too well out of this draft?
I think for me, when I look at it, there's kind of two teams that stick out for me. One is Oblivion. I feel like a lot of these teams that don't necessarily have the highest skill ceiling when it comes to like fighting, like the Moists of the world or the TSMs or the Falcons or, the teams that we are so used to fighting really well, finding good POIs that are easy to rotate from is kind of a key goal you need to have. And I just don't necessarily think just with some of the POIs they got, like North Pad, like traditionally is going to be a tough POI to rotate from, especially with having somebody in front of them, which in this group we know is 100 Thieves. I don't think it takes a brainiac to tell you that Timmy, Jen Burton, and Designful are going to challenge them
Right.
every rotate from that North Pad and Trident side. And I believe Shipyard Arcade. I'm still kind of getting used to the map, but Shipyard Arcade is a map a side that's kind of tougher to rotate from as well, because I think it's a pretty POI dense area on that southern point of the map. So you're gonna have teams like Fnatic and Complexity and Makers and XNY are all around you, and it's going to be a little bit tougher for them to rotate from. So I think that's my main thing for them. And one sneaky team I'm actually interested to see how it plays out is actually Fnatic. And the main reason why I say that is because of the teams around them. So, like I said, X and Y, if you don't know who that is, they're an APAC South team that will fight anybody. And I think just with having Fnatic from a POI that's very close to them on Stormpoint, especially, I could very easily see X and Y play some interesting games in those two games, and potentially rotate towards them because they will fight anybody. And so it may not happen, it could happen, but it's just one of those curveballs that, like, if you're Fnatic, you have to prep for. Right. And as you all know, there's so much stuff you're already prepping for anyway with rotates and trying to figure out end zones, things like that, that any extra variables just makes it that much harder. So it could easily not be a problem, but that's just one team that I think they'll need to keep an eye out for. And then another on one of the other maps, I know they're by Complexity, which I believe it's E District, which Complexity in this meta has fought very well. And again, I don't think Complexity will be a team that's going to want to rotate near them. I do think that they'll probably stay out of each other's way. But if you even include Shadow that's in front of them, Shadow, again, is a very wild card team. They showed pretty well in Germany, and I don't think they're going to be afraid of the bigger teams in this lobby.
Right.
So again, how quickly do they rotate? Do they take longer, which then causes Fnatic to rotate longer? And one thing that Fnatic struggled with at Germany was I think they took a long time and kind of floated on their rotates to where they weren't getting to good spots and setting themselves up pretty well. So that'll just be a thing I think to keep an eye on. More than likely not, they're probably not going to have a problem. They're a very good team, and they can probably easily rotate around it. But just definitely keep an eye on that for this group.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, I think the two that I think really stick out here would be here. I think ExoClan, that's how they play. So like they picked Cascade Falls 12th. That's how they play, right? So you know, there is something to be said to get the picks you want and to have POIs that are easy to grab, right? Like that's a whole strategy. We've seen Legends, right?
Yeah.
Now Premius Commanda, right? They do that they historically have done that strategy, right? Strafing Flame, he picks Landslide, no one's going to take it, right?
Yeah.
That's a genuine strategy. Jurassic, kind of similar strategy, and that way you don't have to stress them as much. I get it. But then also to get Vibe Isle, you're getting your Cascade Falls, Landslide, maybe you want those, but to get Vibe Isle on top of that, not great. Not great. It's not even really a full POI. Not ideal. A underratedly bad, I don't know how to put that better, team in this draft is FaZe Clan. Now let me kind of show you here, because I think that if you looked at this, you'd be like, oh, Echo HQ, that's great. Stadium, that's great. Staging, that's great. And for Echo HQ, you'd be correct. But the thing about Stadium is I think it's a lot. It used to be good in BLGS, and it was good. Had it been with the previous POI draft suggestions, it probably would have been a little bit better. But it's look at this. I mean, you got Stadium, right? You have these two in BLGS. These are like flex, like you land there because you have to, right? And typically when you land Stadium, you are banking on one of the two being taken. In this one, both of them are taken. And the problem is these aren't even really full POIs. And it just causes such a congestion on this side of the map that I'm just not so sure. It's saying heights isn't selected, and I don't think that's true. I think that's a bug on their system. I think we looked at it
I believe
earlier. Yeah,
I want to
TSM
say
has heights.
TSM
Yeah.
has that.
So
Yeah.
that's a bug. So you have literally you're just surrounded and you're just waiting. And obviously this isn't the worst meta for like not rotating quickly, but I just don't like it that these two like very small, not really full POIs are just kind of waiting there, and I think that's going to hurt them. As for World's Edge, it's kind of a similar situation. Staging isn't really we've been saying like people used to think staging was the better version of Mirage. I think right now, just having staging and having Mirage right there means they're going to have to leave quicker than they might want to. Otherwise, they're going to have to risk Mirage running into them. There's just going to be a lot of conflict for them in both of these POIs, and I just think that's could easily ruin their momentum in this tournament. So I'm not going to say it's a death sentence, but I just think that's a team that we're going to see potentially struggle with just the way that it's structured. With that, I think we can move on to the next group, which is
Yeah,
C and
real
D.
quick
Yeah,
for those two teams too. They are both could be trying to play a zone type play style because they're not that insanely fragging type teams.
right.
Like either one of them are. And you really have to draw a fine line when you're playing zone to rotate very well, to find your spots very well. If you don't have that on the day, it can go very poorly very quick.
Right.
And so I think that's what you're getting at is that you really want to try to maximize the POI that you have, whether it's centrally located on the map or it's got good information, whether it's a ring beacon, zone scan, whatever. So both those POIs they have don't necessarily traditionally have one or both of them. So I do agree that like those two teams are definitely gonna have to be crossing every T, dotting every I to play very, very well in order to have a chance. Like not even like place top, but like just even have a chance.
It's not. These
And
are
so,
not group stage winning POIs.
You're right. It's gonna be very tough. And I mean, especially on E District, you're gonna have X and Y on the one side, you're gonna have TSM on the other side, and on top of that, FaZe Clan, Dragons, EXO, NIP, and VK are all quick rotating teams that are all gonna want to do the same thing that are all very close to each other.
Yep.
So it's very easy that they could potentially run into each other when they rotate. So I think those are two very good shouts. That they just really have to be on top of their game if they're going to do well.
Moving into C and D, we have Gaming Gladiators and Alliance, Crazy Raccoon, Team Falcon. This is, Crazy Raccoon is, I believe, Obley is there, right? Obley is still a Crazy Raccoon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we have former land winning. This is split one playoffs winning team. Pretty much.
Obley and St. June from that original roster.
Yep. So two of the three. We have Falcons, which is, comprised of two land winners and Waltzy, who's just one of the best fraggers in the world. We have Alliance, arguably the best team consistency-wise in the year. And we have Gaming Gladiators, who easily could have closed out split two playoffs. And hit match point, 3 games? And then obviously
and a team that got top 10 at the 3 lands to start with. So again, could argue to be the best team this year too.
Yeah, and then we have Liquid Alienware, which is they just won BLGS. They are always top finalists. Aurora's has been a top performer this year. LG, we have Sweet on that team, which is also has high performances. We have Lone Sharks drop that. This is a stat. I would argue. I think this is probably the hardest group stage. I think this is going to be the hardest group stage of any of the matchups. Just looking at it, maybe I'll feel differently, but just looking at it off the base, this is the top level in this is pretty hard to see how anything could be harder than this. So going into this, we had our first pick was Gaming Gladiators because of their overall. I think I forget exactly how they worked it out, but it's like playoff points plays into all of this.
A quick breakdown for seeds, just so in case those who don't know. Essentially, what they took is that they took your 2 performances, so from split 1 playoffs and split 2 playoffs. So this would have been the LA event and the Germany event.
Right.
You got points from that based on how you did. They combined those point totals and then literally just ran down the list 1 through 40. So depending on where you fell, if you were number 1, like Moist was, you were in Group A, Seed 1, and then you'd go just Group B, C, D, and they would wrap back around. So then like the
Right.
fifth best team would be the D and then go that way, and it kind of just snake its way around through the group. So
Okay, that makes
and
sense.
that's how that all worked for those who don't know.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's really helpful. And this was an interesting one because I was very shocked by specifically the Falcons POIs
Hmm.
because historically, we know Zero and he loves Mill, and Gaming Gladiator comes right out the gate, first round pick, and they take Mill, which I would argue is the cornerstone of POIs for Zero. I think that is like that
Hmm.
is the POI for Zero, and so coming out the gate with a little bit cutthroat there, and then for Alliance to sweep in, they take Sky West, which now you have pretty much the two biggest players off the board. People argue those are the two best POIs in the game, and now they're both off the board. No surprise there. Um, Winners of this, do you think pretty clear winners? Do you think that there are any standouts here? I mean, just to speak of myself first, I think that uh, I thought Alliance just swept this. I mean, just looking at Sky West, most people consider I made a video, other people have made videos, best POI in the game, pretty
Yeah.
much, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even just from a numerical, like a statistic standpoint, best POI in the game. Um, EDAM, a lot of people are saying that's the best POI in E District. Trident, that guarantees they're uncontested on here, if I'm not mistaken, on Stormpoint,
Correct.
which means
Yeah.
that their strategy of saving Trident to challenge Northpad like worked this round. So they are
Mm.
getting uncontested on the POI that they love, Northpad on Stormpoint. So they get the POI they want on Stormpoint, best POI in the game on World's Edge, and arguably best or second best POI on E District. That's a slam dunk of a that if I've ever seen one of a
Yeah.
POI draft. Any other ones that stand out to you?
I mean, I really like Crazy Raccoon's draft. I think they definitely took a little bit of a different approach when it came to this, as they were one of the few teams that went E District first. I believe them and like NIP were the main two that consistently looked to potentially take E District first, and they grab Lotus, which again I think along with Electro Dam has been the ones that a lot of the top teams have looked to take, whether they're practicing or in BLGS events. So I think them going there and then able to grab Stacks and Devastated Coast. I think for me, Devastated Coast is definitely very underrated from Stormpoint if you have the right team playing from it. We've
Right.
seen teams play from there and it's gone very terribly. And
Yeah.
we've seen
Yeah.
teams that have played from there, like TSM, who have actually found success from there.
Right.
Again, I think it fits teams that know how to rotate correctly and efficiently, but also aren't afraid to take fights on edge. Because I think eventually you do run into games where you just are forced to based on the rotate and where the zone ends up taking you. So I really liked their draft. Again, I think that with Stormpoint going off the board so fast, I think they really took an opportunity to say, hey, we're comfortable with going a coastal camp or a devastated coast. That should still be there with us having a top pick in the third round. So let's go grab two strong POIs and then let's just go take that one that we know we can get towards the end. So I really liked their draft. And then a draft that I think was really good too that not too many people might talk about is Liquid Alienware's draft. Um, they are known as the Dome team. They have played there very often. They are known from being able to rotate from Dome all the way to Skyhook to win games. And whether they get a bunch of kills along the way or they somehow find a good spot in zone and win the game from there, they're one of the few teams I think that can make that rotate work. On top of that, I think they're going to force teams that are in front of them, like a Crazy Raccoon or the team that's over on launch site, which I'm not sure who that might be, but regardless, the teams that are going to be in front of them, they're going to know that Liquid's behind them. Liquid's one of the best fighting teams in the world right now. You do not want to be behind in your rotate. So those teams are going to be trying to rotate pretty quickly, which is actually Gaming Gladiators. So that's going to be really interesting to see with Gaming Gladiators at launch site, Liquid at Dome, Crazy Raccoon at Stacks, how that all is going to work. Because I think all those teams can take a fight. I think Liquid's probably the most confident of those three teams right now. So I really like their draft because they also played out a Barometer a ton. So them getting Barometer on Stormpoint makes a ton of sense. And then Blossom Drive, again, is another POI that a lot of people have had success from on E-District. So I really just like theirs overall.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. The only ones like moving into ones that I'm not a fan of. Honestly, I feel like a lot of these are pretty solid. There aren't a ton that I'm like. Everyone's got at least something okay. The ones that
Mm-hmm.
stick out are Supernova. I mean, I landslide vibe aisle. I'm actually a proponent that landslide isn't that bad if you're playing zone. I actually kind of like it,
Mm-hmm.
but still not the best. I'm not a huge fan of vibe aisle. Obviously, that's like probably second worst, maybe
Mm-hmm.
POI you can get there. Um, this reignite harvester Jurassic Canal again can work for them if they're playing zone, but it's just not ideal. I really don't feel like just looking at this that there's anyone that just completely, fumbled the bag. It seems like everyone got something at least decent. It doesn't feel as maybe lopsided as I felt like the previous
Yeah.
draft did. Anything else, like anything stand out to you in terms of the worst drafts?
Yeah, the only team I'd be a little bit worried for would probably be Stallions, and a lot of it's more of just because I think from and a lot of these teams that are lower in the draft, they only have choices that they can make that are left in front of them because obviously everybody above them is drafting all the really good POIs. But Stallions is definitely a team that like if they're on the right day, they can compete with anybody. But they on two of the maps are in a very tough situation with teams that are surrounding them. With World's Edge, I know Furia going from Mirage Etoile is definitely going to be again a team that they've already stated if there's teams that's going staging, they are in the ape zone and they will push you. So if they're not rotating quick, Stallions are probably going to end up taking fights potentially with Furia, basically off drop. And then on E District, I believe that they're also by a couple teams that they will, Orlis in Hungary and Aurora. Again, two teams that do not need an excuse to fight. So
True.
they just, again, having that in the back of your mind of like, I've got two teams that are very willing to run it down. I either need to have a plan to, I'm going to fight this, or I have to run. Because if you get stuck in between, you're going to get picked off very easily, no matter how good you are. So those are just two POIs that I'm a little uneasy for them. They're really going to have to come with a smart plan to navigate those teams around them correctly. But outside of that, I agree with you. I don't think there's really anything that was too egregious. Yeah, there's some that aren't as good as others, but again, that's just going to happen in a POI draft. So I think we basically covered it on that one.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just jump right into B versus D. I think we're doing pretty good pacing here. For this one, we got Fnatic Alliance, Crazy Raccoon, formerly Legends, Primus Commando. We got Lone Sharks, Alienware. Still really solid grouping here. Obviously, we got
Mm-hmm.
Phony here in Guild. I didn't even talk about them in last group. Which right? I think he was also in there. No, okay, so he was in.
He was A versus
Got
B,
it.
yeah.
Okay, so he's B. Yeah, I mean this is another land champion. I can't be like scraping over that, right? So now we have
Yeah.
Fnatic home court advantage here. We got Alliance, obviously, one of the best teams. We got like consistency wise. Crazy Raccoon, Guild, both champions this year. Legend's been doing great. Primus Commanda. Yeah, I mean, going into this, looking over it, I think again we have to look at Alliance, who secures Skyhook West, secures Height, which again, like one of the best POIs on like top 2 to 3 in E District, and then the Trident strat works again, and Alliance gets the POI. So I mean, this is again to me just another clean sweep of a draft, and Alliance wins, which for the team that like historically just does so well in group stages, to see them get like sweep of a POI draft like this is insane.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty clear that on Storm Point most teams are going to avoid that Trident North Pad area. Again, Alliance has definitely owned that side of the map. They know the rotates from there, and also we know how good of a fighting group they are. I don't think again Effect and Unlucky need any excuse to fight anybody, and we already know how well Hawkus can really can IGL those guys. So again, we saw kind of the result of a team getting in that way when Fnatic and Alliance met. I believe it was split 2 playoffs. Did not really end well for either team. As good as Alliance was, really either team did not benefit from that relationship whatsoever. So yeah, it's definitely, it's definitely good for them to see that they get that isolated to themselves. They don't have to worry about a fight with anybody. Um, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned Guild, getting Mill with the fourth pick is definitely not one you're used to seeing. I believe Fnatic really hasn't played out of Mill, so that was really never going to be in play for them. Alliance again loves going Skyhook West if it's available as their first pick. And like I mentioned with Crazy Raccoon, they have been going with the E District pick in this draft and went with Lotus because they're comfortable with that. And they were comfortable with the other POIs. They actually got the same 3 POIs from the previous draft. So looking at Guild here, you get Mill, which kind of falls into your lap.
Right.
You're definitely happy about that. And then Resort and Launch Site, again, I think 2 very solid POIs. The World's Edge one might be a little tougher, just because of the location being at the southernmost point of the map outside of Dome. And just again having Liquid by you, who will rotate quick, who will not be afraid to fight you. And obviously with Phony's plan, we know has an IGL, very hard zone IGL, very good at it. His rotates are usually very top tier. So that'll just be something they have to keep in mind in terms of their rotates and how they do there. On E District, again, Resort is a very solid POI. If they rotate correctly, they shouldn't have too much traffic in front of them because, as you can see, there's a pretty big opening where there's not a POI there. So as long as they're rotating correctly, they shouldn't really have any issues with running into Supernova and Crazy Raccoon there. So I think overall a very solid draft. It'll just have to be very mindful on World's Edge of who they're by, but really like the draft from them, especially when you get Mill just to fall into your lap. You take that 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Guild definitely has a pretty solid draft there. I think if I were to throw my kind of hat for who I think has the better drafts here, I have to give it the consistency. And Liquid Alienware and Crazy Raccoon both, they secure the POIs that they wanted. And I think that sometimes that is more important than the best POI is a POI that fits to your playstyle, the POI you've been practicing on. Those rotates like the back of your hand. I think there's a lot of value in that, and the fact that both of them were able to secure those again is a huge benefit for them. So I think that like those two probably are the clearer winners for me in terms of POIs that I'm not a fan of, or I guess drafts that I'm not as big of a fan of. There's Meteor is not my favorite. Landslide Canal Plaza's one of those random E District, really not a POI. And then Dragons is one that I wouldn't like, but I think that they get a little bit of a. It seems like if they are, because I think Dragons picked Jurassic 16th, and they were kind of going for more zone POIs, and so it is again one of those things they're playing to their comforts, so you can't necessarily harp it against them, but at the same time not a draft that I'm particularly a fan of. Getting Viaduct at 56th is pretty good, though. Actually, I was kind of surprised that went as late as it did. That being said, I mean, yeah, it's not. That's one of my least favorite. What would you say is your least favorite of the drafts here? Or you think one of the worst?
Um, I mean, taking a look here, I think Go Next might have a little issue with kind of where they're at. Again, if you're thinking on World's Edge, you have Big Mod. Um, Typically of Big Mod and Stacks, you prefer Stacks. I know Big Mod obviously has some of the weapons and things like that, but Stacks kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility and a little more room to to loot those buildings. Whereas Big Mod, you're kind of just isolated and kind of in like that one corner. You only have so many like spots to go.
Right.
So that could definitely be some trouble, and especially again, I want to mention with Liquid being from Dome, you have Crazy Raccoon at Stacks. You really have to be on top of your rotate. You really have to have a plan to rotate quickly and get the heck out of there. Because again, if you're gonna take too long, either one of those teams will fight you. And if it's not Crazy Raccoon, then Liquid definitely will if you're taking too long.
Or it's Legends
So,
and Geyser.
or Legends and Geyser. So
Not good
you
company.
yeah, so you definitely don't have some neighbors that definitely will agree with you. But yeah, that's definitely one I'm a little worried for them. But yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right with like Meteor. I was very surprised to see Wall go as their first round pick. I definitely thought there's some other options that they could have gone with instead
Yeah.
of that. If that's a comfort pick for them, obviously that makes a lot of sense. I haven't been able to watch too much of their specific picks that they like to go with. So that could just be what that is. But obviously, you see the picks behind it. Overlook generally has been a decent POI for World's Edge. You have Height on E District. You had Stacks on World's Edge. You had Resort on E District. Those were the next 4 picks that went after it.
Right.
You'd think maybe those are a little bit better choices, but again, kind of like we talked about with Storm Point, they maybe felt like, oh, all these POIs were already taken. We kind of need to get something on that map.
Right.
So that probably is a little bit of what they fell into. The other team I'll mention as more a little bit on the good side is VK Gaming, a team I think that really flew under the radar at Split 2 playoffs. A team that rotated very well with the crypto. They're actually one of the first teams that went to the crypto and played it very well and ended up getting a top 10, which is why their seeding was a lot higher. But they get a lot of central rotating POIs from the picks that they were able to get. Lava Siphon, again, has seen a lot of success from there. Stormcatcher and Energy Bank, both very centrally located maps. So definitely keep an eye on how well they're placing, because they maybe won't have a ton of kills, but they're a team, like a comparison I'd compare it to an NA team would be a Cloud9, where they do a very good job of rotating quick, rotating to good spots, and then it's just about can they hold that spot for the entire length of the game. So that'll be another team to keep an eye on from this particular group that I'm really curious to see how they do.
Awesome. So let's move into A and C here. Again, another great grouping here. I think that it seems like I'm trying to think. Is it A? It feels like A is like the stacked.
A has 5 NA teams, I believe, if I remember correctly, and literally the first couple were TSM and Moist.
Yeah.
And then you also throw in 100 Thieves in there, I believe. If I have it right, I'm just double checking my notes. I believe Cloud9 is in that group as well.
Yeah, I don't know if it's sorted.
Yeah, Cloud9, 100 Thieves, NRG, TSM, Moist are the 5 NA teams from that group. And then, excuse me, there's 6 with Oblivion. But those 5 especially have been very high performing teams at times. Obviously, the 100 Thieves roster, we'll have to see how that shakes out. There's a little more questions there, but we'll get into that later. But yes, Group A, very, very tough group.
Yeah, and this one is one where we have seen, this is the first example. Well, actually, no, I think in A and B this happened as well. I'll have to check. Let me check this real quick. I believe on Storm Point. Yeah, so 100 Thieves has been doing the Trident strat, right? They go for Trident so that they can secure North Pad. And what we see here is yet again they get denied it. This time by Falcons. Again, they have to, Alliance has earned that reputation. Alliance has done so well at the previous lands that they have proved, hey, we are going to make it to the next bracket stage. You aren't forcing us out. And I think for these other teams, 100 Thieves is not that same threat to them right now. And so I think that their posit that they're going to land Trident and take whoever goes to North Pad, that threat just is not as substantiated as Alliance has secured it. And now they, unfortunately, you have to stand on business when you do that. If you want it to be successful, they have to go and contest. So, I mean, we see that happen here. Falcons says we're taking Trident, and 100 Thieves goes North Pad. And I think that was a good strategy for Falcons to go Trident, to force 100 Thieves to North Pad, because they still get to do the contest, but it's on their terms. They have the Trident, the physical Trident, and they can, leave when they want to, as opposed to Falcons has to, or as opposed to 100 Thieves now has to wait. Now they do get a lot better loot there, but obviously not as much of access to the like the beasts there. You don't get as much of the Evo that you're going to get from the other section from Trident, and rotation timing, obviously. So I'm I feel bad for 100 Thieves, because first 2 really puts a downer on those specific drafts. They obviously get Thermal Station again. Mm-hmm. They get City Hall. I really like their overall draft, but that contest is going to be pretty important for their performance. I don't know what the match order is, where Storm Point lines up, but I'm thinking that if we're going into Storm Point the 5th and 6th games of the set, I don't think and 100 Thieves isn't in a good spot. It's going to change a lot. Same goes for Falcons, right? It's going to be a really interesting determining factor here. I think I'm interested to see. But coming out of this, like my personal favorite, and I think winner of the draft, in my opinion, is Game and Gladiators. The Mill, I, again, top 2 best POIs arguably ever. Heights, arguably, top 1 to 3 in E District. Launch Site, a really, really solid edge POI. I think this is a great, great draft. I also think TSM has a really good one. Any standouts for you here in best drafts? And then if you want to go into your least favorite, you can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think really what this comes down to, because again, I think a lot of the teams that were towards the bottom part of the draft kind of was what you're stuck with. I think those picks that they had were a little bit better. So I won't necessarily go down there. I think I'll just with the Falcons 100 Thieves thing. I think you hit the nail on the head. If like we said, we've seen the example of this already, right? We've seen Alliance and Fnatic in the past. How two teams, no matter how highly skilled they are, just contesting of any sorts just absolutely throws off any sort of game plan you have. And so you have to plan for that. You have to plan for a team to be on your back the whole time, or plan for a team to be in front of you the whole time. And it just can cause a lot of issues that, again, you're already planning for so much. Like you said, if we get to game 5 and 6, those are the last 2 games you have. Or if it's the reverse, if those are games 1 and 2 and they don't go well, you basically just limited yourself to only having 4 games to accumulate the points you need. So the only good thing for them is that it's a group stage. So if they don't do necessarily as well, they will have at least one more match up after that to kind of make up for it. But again, you don't just want to throw out one group ever. If you can get 40, 50 points from a group, you can basically solidify yourself easily. So having potential only 4 games to get it done in one group definitely just makes it a little more uneasy than you want it to when you're going to play for $2 million. So
Yeah, absolutely.
but yeah, I think a team again that I really liked, I would say NRG to go with somebody different. I think they've gained some experience from playing from Lava Siphon, because for the longest time, Zero and his teams and even Hal there for a little bit of the time was going Lava Siphon. So that really wasn't a POI that was up for grabs until more recently. And so seeing NRG, they've played it a little bit more out of there. They've seemed to be comfortable from there. Again, if there's anybody that's to cook up a good plan, I think it's going to be Hot Tick and Nocturnal and the boys. So I feel really confident from their World's Edge POIs. And then getting Resort, another very solid POI in E-District. And then, like I mentioned earlier with Devastated Coast, if you play it correctly, it's a very good POI to have as your third choice, because there's a lot worse options that you have that basically give you nothing to play with. Whereas at least Devastated Coast, you at least have some options that you could potentially quick rotate, but if you have teams that are playing in front of you, you basically can just piggyback off the information that they already got. So if you play a little bit slower for, a ring scan down in Launchpad, or if you go over to Echo HQ and rotate that way, there's usually some sort of information there that you can gain. So there's definitely it's a very versatile POI, I think, and I think that's something that NRG plays well with, is the versatility. So whether they want to play fast and they have kill shred teams, or they play a little bit slower and they go for a little bit more of a rotate, which I think we'll probably see more often with them, is a little bit more rotate focused. But I think especially recently they've gained a lot more form with their fighting. So if they do end up having to fight a little more edge from Devastated Coast, I don't think they'll hesitate. So
yeah, and moving into like the kind of my least favorites in this draft, NIP is interesting. I was watching, and they really seem to have fully leaned into zone play pretty heavily. And so we see Energy Bank going 13th. Wouldn't have been my 13th pick. I think it's an interesting choice, but it's something they've been getting comfortable with. They choose Jurassic as their 33rd. Probably could have gotten something better, but that's what they chose. Survey Camp at the 53rd, actually a surprisingly pretty good pick to get at that point in the game. I'm not a big fan, but I think if that's something that they're trying to play, then I think that's good. But definitely, I think looking at my least favorite, Eternal kind of takes the cake. I think Overlook's good. I don't think it's your first
round pick
of the 3. Yeah. I'm not as bullish on Overlook as maybe some other people are. I still think it's good. I don't think that first round you're going for it. Stormcatcher, again, it's okay. It's good, and people have done well out of Overlook for sure. Not my go-to. And then Old Town, which is just there's a reason they got it 59th. It's not the best. I've heard some people preach it. I think Enoch on the Apex pod. I think he was preaching all the time, but that's for ranked, a little different.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I think Eternal has probably incomparably the worst. Like I think this is definitely the worst on the draft that I can see. Just
Yeah.
I don't think anyone comes close. What do you think?
Yeah.
Any other worse ones than or close to that?
I mean, I think I would agree with you because again, you see Overlook go, you see Stacks go right after that. It's like, was that an option that they maybe weren't comfortable with,
Right.
that they really haven't played much? Maybe that's why they skip it over. Yeah, I mean, Overlook just really isn't that kind of like sexy pick you kind of want for your first pick, as if that's a way to put it. But
Yeah.
I think I agree with you with the NIP thing. I don't think necessarily choosing those is bad. It's just that you are really committing to one play style with those
Right.
POIs. There's really not a ton of flexibility with it. And a team that is struggling comparative to nasty teams that we've seen in the past who have been teams that can challenge for a top 10, top 15 in a LAN, these POIs don't necessarily scream that.
Yeah.
And especially when the point is to accumulate points in your group stages, this is one that you're really banking on that you place well. And if there's anything we know about Apex is that zones at lands are just so unpredictable.
Yeah.
And so if you have a bad day with zone reading or the zones that pop, then you are going to have a very, very tough day. And they've got some firepower in fights, but especially when you get to land, a lot more things, unpredictable things that you try to prepare for just aren't things that you're used to. You can scrim all you want, but it's just not what LAN is. So again, it's for a team that's struggling, you would hope maybe for a little bit better POIs. But I know Nasky had mentioned that Energy Bank was a POI that they were looking at for a while.
Right.
And again, if you're committing to that, you're basically committing to that central rotating POI. So then it kind of makes sense for Jurassic and Survey Camp to follow along. But Survey Camp, as a lot of people may or may not know, loves to try to split the tunnel with Sky East. And if we take a look at Sky East, guess what team pops up? It's Aurora. And I'm telling you, man, and this is not a negative connotation when I say this for people who might think that Aurora just will fight anybody, but it's because they are that confident in their fighting ability, which they have shown in the past that their play style can take them to a top 5 in a LAN.
Yep.
So making that decision for NIP of do we try to contest that tunnel? Do we not? Because if you don't get that tunnel, then the loot from survey camp is pretty trash.
Yeah.
But if you do decide to contest it and you don't fight well, because we've seen nasty teams contesting, it's gone well at times and it's gone very bad at times.
Right.
Aurora was the one that literally thirded one of the contests earlier this year when they were contesting against Zach Mazur's team.
Yep.
So it's just one of those things that with that POI, you have to have a plan. And if there's one variable you don't plan for, whether like GHS tries to counter rotate or Falcons rotates faster or Aurora just tries to hit you, there's just so many things that you have to be prepared for from a POI like that. I think that's just where my worry comes from. So
absolutely. Moving into BC here. Looking at this POI draft, we got Fnatic, Gaming Gladiators, Falcons, Guild, former Legends, LG Aurora. This is another. I mean, obviously, we're gonna have a pretty big stack at the top for all of these, but yeah, again, another big competition here. Looking at this one and thinking of winners again, this is the first. I mean, I haven't disliked any of the Falcons drafts, but I think this is my favorite of them. I think they've had some iteration of this, some similar iteration of this in their other ones. They've been going for Lightning Rod because basically everyone's been taking Mill before they could get to it. Makes sense. Lightning Rod's really good. Heights, top 1 to 2. Launch site, really solid edge POI. I think that this is the best of the 3 that Falcons has got. And I think it might be, in my opinion, my favorite that I'm seeing here in general as far as drafts go. I'm a pretty big fan of that one. Other than that, I don't really see any like big standout ones. I like Fanatics. I like 2 of the 3 for Gaming Gladiators. Getting Galleria 3rd, not a really bad pick. It's just a different type of pick than maybe what they're normally going to be running with the Thermal and a Mill. But otherwise not bad. So maybe Gaming Gladiators, another good one. What, in your opinion, any other winners that you see here?
Yeah, I think I agree with you with the Falcons picks. I think this is their best draft just in terms of like you've kind of taken all the factors. Again, we know Zero, we know Hal, we know that whole, Walty, Privacy, Draugr, that entire group, they're gonna be able to plan for anything from any POI. So like we don't need to sit here and say like, oh, like they're gonna be that bad out of this POI or whatever.
Right.
I think just this one, it just kind of seems the path of least resistance that we're looking at here. Because you kind of look around them, with launch site, there's nobody coming from Dome they have to worry about. They're going to have complexity on their left. That's not going to look to really fight early on if they don't have to. And then I believe was it Virtus Pro, I believe, was up in Lava Siphon. Yep. So that's going to be another team that's not really going to be looking for early fight. So their rotates from there should be a lot easier if it's more of a northern pull for them. And then Lightning Rod, again, very top tier POI. And again, on that side, not really a team that's going to look to end them with Team Burger. That's going to be a team that's also going to be looking to rotate from Zoo Station. So I really do like their draft of the three. I think this is their best one. I agree. The other one I'm looking at here of just the teams that maybe not looking at the top 2 or 3 is Complexity. Again, like I talked with Launchpad earlier, I think it's a very good POI. Usually, again, gets a lot of information you can grab from that POI, a lot of very solid loot, and the rotates from there are very solid rotates. You can go in a lot of different directions, get a lot of evo along the way. Or again, if you get those like Echo HQ pulls, you have a very quick rotate over to Echo HQ because we've seen a lot of Echo HQ, a lot of devastated coasts lately. So if that continues to be the trend, those are very solid rotates for them from there. City Hall again, POI I think is very solid, and again it allows you to rotate, which again, if anybody knows Monsoon for the longest time, that's what he will default to is an early rotating play style. Obviously not maybe the early versions of Complexity where they kind of could just fight anybody, but I think more recently he's kind of deferred to that just based on the team that he's built. But and then Tree as well, like we mentioned earlier with Cloud9. Tree, I think, a very underrated POI. Again, a lot of zones that pull to that southern spot of Tree. So if you can kind of get that head start there, it's very easy to go from. And then on top of that, if you really wanted to rotate up through like a thermal station or rotate through Harvester, typically at least the Harvester rotate, those teams are going to be cleared out by then, so you can gain the information from Harvester and kind of work your way up that way. So I really like that from Complexity in this group.
Yeah, and then going into like the not favorites here, Dragons comes up again. I Jurassic. If you're a hard zone team, that's what you want. It can work. It can be fine. It can be good even. 15th pick. I just think there's something better, right? There's got to be something better. Still fine, teach their own. Countdown, not terrible. Did they give it a ring console?
For Countdown?
Well, it has a ring console, doesn't have a survey beacon. Right?
I think that's right. Yeah, I don't have that up in front of me, but I think you're right with that.
Which, if that's the case, that's fine, because we're not, unless you're playing Mirage, you're not using it. So that's fine. I don't think this team would be. They're going to have to run a cat the way they're playing. Settlement, again, you're at 55th place. You're not getting the cream of the crop here. So not the best. I feel like still there's got to be something better in Settlement. But if it's E-District, it all got sold out. That's what can you do about that? So either way, not a good look. Not one of my favorites here. This here, I was trying to see, did anyone get, let me go and look at the map here. Yeah, so this is another one that I'm not a fan of here. I actually think getting Lotus in 20th is insane for Meteor. I think that's crazy. I think Survey Camp, not the best Northpad. Would have been good, but now obviously they chose that as a contest to Trident and Eternal. So I think Meteor not the worst on here. I think the Lotus they better do really well in Lotus. Survey, we've seen it be done well. So there's chances there. Eternal, though, I mean, Overlook, okay, but again, 19th, I think maybe hopefully you could have done better than that. Trident, you're getting contested there. And then Vibe Isle is just really, really bad. I think Eternal's probably the worst here that I can see. Any other ones that stick out as bad, particularly bad for you?
Yeah, I'm looking around. I don't see necessarily anything too bad. The only team I maybe say I'd be worried for a little bit would be Noctum. They're again a team. They're from the EMEA region that actually had some pretty decent success here at this past land in Germany. But they're a team that definitely will want a quick rotate, and I know their form hasn't necessarily been the best lately. And I think for having Draft Point and Big Mod, again, I very much look at the teams that surround you.
Right.
Is that going to force you to change how you play? Is that going to force you to have to speed up your game, have to slow down your game? And I think for me, when you look at E District and they have Draft Point, you've got Fnatic, you've got Makers, and you got X and Y that are behind you. And again, those are teams that if they see a rotating team that is caught out and not moving quick enough, they will go fight you, and that'll just completely ruin your games there. And then I think if you look at World's Edge with Big Mod, like I mentioned earlier, Big Mod can be a very tough place to play from, especially if you have a team that will want to fight you. And surprise, surprise, we have my favorite team apparently to bring up is Aurora, who is also by them. And again, Aurora will loot, and they will look to, especially knowing the team that's in front of them knocked them of them wanting to rotate fast. Aurora will probably look to maybe get an early pick.
Right.
So that'll just be something that they have to keep in mind. And you look at teams that are the left, like Lava Siphon, or the team to the right at Kaiser. Those are two teams that are also going to want to gather information and rotate. So if they're on the same pacing, those very easily could run over each other at some point. Or excuse me, if they're off pacing, those are teams that could potentially run into each other. These zone teams, like we talk about a lot of times, it really is about their pacing of rotating quickly, but also at the right time so they don't run into somebody else. So if one of those teams are just off their pace, that's just going to cause a change of reaction. Let's say Team Burger takes longer to rotate, Noctum will run into them, and then if they don't clean up a fight or one of those teams decides not to rotate, Aurora, that's a very common place for teams to rotate from stacks, is up that right side through the Geyser tunnel. They could easily third any fight that Team Burger or Noctum could potentially run into. So, yeah, I would say that's probably the team that I might be a little more worried for is Noctum just because of the play style they have and then the teams that surround them.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. We'll jump into the last one here. We got A versus D, and for this one we have Moist Alliance, Crazy Raccoon, TSM, Cloud9, Liquid, Lone Shark, another great
Personally, I think the
stacked
most
one.
loaded matchup, if you just take all of the teams and either potential that we've seen in the past or their current form, I think this is the matchup to watch. And
Okay.
the fact that it's our last one could
Yeah.
potentially decide a lot, whether it's seeding, whether it's the last few teams that get in. This is the one that I'm ready for. And the fact that it's last, I'm like, dude, I
I
am
mean,
so ready for this. Like, it's going to be so early in the morning and my brain's going to be cooked, but I'll get whatever energy drink I
dude.
need to be up to watch this
And there's
because
going to be
it is going to be
so
crazy.
much on the line too, because I mean, like
Yeah.
as opposed to previous ones where there was like these like starting points, the draft order is just so much more important. And
Hmm.
I mean, this is going to be a big time one. Alliance
Yeah.
here, they get a little bit of a weird run this time. I mean, they don't
Hmm.
get the picks they wanted. They get Climatizer, a fantastic POI, just not the
Hmm.
one that they are used to. Not a big deal. And the reason I talk about Alliance just because of how good their previous ones were. They get Street Market again. They get Heights and Edam before, so which means they're landing 3 different POIs. How is that going to affect them? And their rotates, especially with those two are next to each other. Street Markets across the map. Good POI though. Good POI.
Hmm.
And then they get Trident. And let me check here because I think that yeah. So they did. This is the only time they get contested. It's by NRG, which is not a team that they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily the best team for it. But at the end of the day, got to stand on business. This is the this is this is going to be really interesting because this is happening whether they like it or not. This is a POI. You're locked
Yep.
in for this, and this is the 6th group stage, which means that they
Yep.
like NRG Alliance. They go into this whether or not they are in a good standing. They're here and they are dropping there.
Yep.
And I think
And
if history tells itself, Alliance is going to be in a really good spot, and NRG is going to be somewhere in that like middle area and
Yeah.
that's not a team you want holding you. You don't want Furia over there and Down Beast right next to you. These are not teams you just want right next to you on edge. So I don't like it.
Hawkes has already been quoted on his stream because I was watching scrims earlier and he was on there and he said if anybody's gonna take North Pad, we are gonna make an example of that team. So they are ready for that fight. They are ready to go. I would not surprise me at all if they literally say, "Hey, you grab the first 2 guns and 2 shield cells you need, and we are turning around and chasing these guys down," because
Yeah.
they want that side of the map. They've made it very obvious that that is a point that they will prove to any team that comes that way. And I applaud NRG for taking the risk. You just hope that their standing's pretty good so they don't have to sweat anything out by then. But again, it's gonna make it very interesting because based off of past behaviors, like you mentioned, Alliance typically performs well in groups. NRG, at least as of lately, have with Nocturnal's teams anyway. We should say Nocturnal's teams, not necessarily NRG, but Nocturnal's teams kind of have floated in that middle sometimes and not necessarily have been the highest standing at all times. So how does that play out? Do they change their strategy if they get to this group and they're not necessarily locked in yet? That'll definitely be something to keep an eye on. One team I do want to talk about, and I know I've mentioned them already, but I do want to mention them again because I really love the draft, is Cloud9. I really think overall, if you went to pick 5 teams that drafted well, that maybe aren't necessarily the number 1 and 2 picks, I think Cloud9 is one of them.
Yeah.
I think just saying, hey, I know we play a certain way, but if frickin' Mill's there, I'm just gonna take it,
Yeah.
And I think seeing them take that and then back it up with an energy bank and a tree, like we've already talked about,
Same.
fits their play style. I think is a really good choice. I think that they will be able to loot up very well. I think Mill, on top of having good loot, also allows a lot of access to different sides of the map. You get very good information from that POI. So I feel really good about where they're drafted, especially with this group. And again, Cloud9 getting a lot of their points based off of placement. They definitely can get some kills in there. Don't get me wrong. Naughty and Shuby can definitely be filthy, but especially when placement's kind of their calling card. I think the POIs that they got in this group, especially where I'm just gonna deem it the group of death. I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but I'm calling it the group of death. I would say that they did very well for themselves here.
Yeah, and another like interesting thing is like energy would have been great. I wanted to say this, but earlier you chimed in about the lava set. I love that they're finally out of Monument Jail. I think that Monument's
Yeah.
not my favorite. They've been landing there
Yeah.
for a long time. It's good to see them move up to like a siphon that I think you can do a lot more from. Teams that I actually think did surprisingly very well in this draft is Oblivion. I'm shocked to see Edam and Stormcatcher as 20th and
Yeah.
40th. Getting Edam and 20th is insane. They took advantage of that. I'm happy to see it. And then Epicenter, I don't dislike. I mean, it's you're taking 60th, you're taking the best you can get, right? So Epicenter's not bad. Epicenter's not terrible. I actually think I'm not saying this is one of the best drafts I've seen on this. It is not even one of the best on this, but for having the 20th round pick, that is the one of the best case scenarios for Oblivion. I think it's like a pretty
Yeah.
solid as far as last place goes. Even Supernova, not the worst for a 19th in the draft. Cascade, Viaduct, Geyser, workable POIs.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing right there. And then even Enter Force 36, Heights, Wall. I don't know what was happening here. It seems like it was a storm, more of a like storm point movement here. But seeing like Heights go for East 36 in 14th, kind of insane to me. So this is a weirder draft where I feel like the lower end got some good stuff. One I think is uncharacteristic, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but in Split 2, is Shadow 3690 not the team running Revenant?
I believe they might have been. Let me double check
that is historically
real
a very
fast,
aggressive team, I think. Am I not? This is one of the Chinese invite teams, or am I wrong?
Yeah, let me double check that real quick on that because I believe you are correct with that. Scrolling up real quick. Yeah, so the Chinese invite team, yes, they were the team that was playing Revenant. And they actually had finished only 2 spots outside of making finals at Split 2 playoffs. So, yeah, a really good shout out there. Again, a team that is very unpredictable. But, yeah, go ahead. I think you're about to make the point that I think I noticed.
It's just so uncharacteristic to me. Like Checkpoint Monument
Yeah.
just do not mesh with the way they
Yeah.
play. Like Old Town kind of makes sense. They land on the outside and they're just gonna look for fights and they'll figure their stuff on the way. Like for a team like this, to see them get like a monument and a checkpoint is just weird. And so like it's not I don't know enough about them aside from what I've seen at LAN to really be like they can't play zone. I don't know how
Yeah.
they've shifted with this meta. I haven't seen a ton of their action in scrims, but I mean, it's just weird. It's just a weird pick for me. Other than that, I don't really have any like big lows. This is actually surprisingly fairly leveled out in this draft. Anything else sticks
Yeah.
out to you?
No, I think that's about it. I think one thing again I'll be interested to see with Furia is how they end up playing out of survey camp. I'm also not as big a fan of Down Beast. I just felt like I haven't seen too many teams perform very well out of Down Beast. I know it's not a bad POI, but I do just think sometimes it takes a long time to loot. And I think that like if you're a team that really wants to hit your P's and Q's when it comes to rotating, that could definitely be one that's a little bit slower and you kind of have to adjust how you play from there. Because especially you can't go to your left because you're gonna have Alliance half the time, and in this group they do like they have Alliance, so you can't really go that way. To your right, it's going to be the middle team, once you go up that way. So like you don't really have too many options besides to go really through like the checkpoint area, unless you want to wait for those teams to clear out. But again, those could be teams that are probably going to loot a little bit longer typically, and take their time getting the information. So I'll be interested to see how Furia plays out of these. Again, I think it's a very capable team, but I think one thing we've always talked about is consistency. And I don't think the POIs they typically or the POIs they chose here, maybe outside of Resort, because I think Resort's pretty good from my understanding. By Down Beast Survey Camp, I'm not as high on personally. So I'll be interested to see how they necessarily do from there. Again, if we look at Survey Camp, they also have NIP out of Sky East. Do they end up fighting them for that tunnel? And again, if you take your time rotating from that top of the map, you've got Moist over there, you've got Alliance over there. So it might be a little tougher for them. It might be someone I might be a little concerned about.
Right.
But they are a team that if they're on top of their game and whether they decide to go for the tunnel loot or not, if they are playing well and rotating well and Manus is IGL in the way that he's capable of, I think they'll be just fine. But I think there's just a lot of question marks that I may not feel as comfortable with going into that group for them.
Yeah. So just team names. You don't need to go into like explanation or anything. What would you give me your top 5 best drafts? So like over all group stages, just give me the 5 teams that you think did the best in the draft. You don't even have to order them if you don't like, but just top 5.
Yeah, I'd probably say no. No, it'd probably take too long for that, and I'm not trying to keep the people here too long. But I'd probably say in no particular order. I would probably say, I'd probably say Alliance has to obviously be up there. I think Liquid would be up there just based on what they've got. I think Cloud9 for me would be up there. I'm trying to think who else. I would say probably, I think I'd be dumb not to mention Moist. I think they would be up there. But again, a lot of that, obviously, they kind of earned that right to be one of the better teams just based on how well they played. And honestly, I really like, if I didn't mention it already, I really like Crazy Raccoon's draft. I think that kind of going off a little bit of the route of Storm Point having to be first. I think, again, they said, well, we are comfortable with Coastal Camp or Devastated Coast because that should be there by the time it gets back to us. Let's go get 2 very good POIs that we want on the other 2 maps that teams may not necessarily have. And I think getting Lotus, I believe they got Lotus all 3 times, and then they got Stacks all 3 times. I mean, I definitely have to tip my hat to them. I think they had a very clear plan, and they stuck to that plan. And I think that is one thing that really wasn't talked about from Split 1 is that they really didn't do it the way everybody else was doing it. They were playing the Watson, playing very against what a lot of other teams are doing, and it worked very well for them. So I think them continuing down that path is only going to set themselves up for a lot more success, especially since they are playing a lot better recently too. So yeah, there's my short but long explanation for that.
No, you're good. I would say going for my top 5, I'd go Falcons. I think they actually did pretty solid. They're not the stuff they're normally we're used to seeing the Falcons do. I still think it's good. I mean, they got Lightning Rod most of the time. They got Heights or EDAM or got some of this stuff there. So I like the Falcons team. I obviously Alliance is I think number one across the board. You've kind of swayed me. I think Cloud9 is would be in my top five. And then I think in terms of the other teams here, I am leaning towards I would like Crazy Reckon a lot more if there wasn't the Stacks pick, just
Mhm.
because of the density there. I really like
Yeah.
Gaming Gladiators because they secure mill, I believe, on two of their three or three of their three. And they get heights, launch site pretty regularly. They got thermal station once. I really like Gaming Gladiators picks here. And then if I were to go for a fifth, and we really didn't talk about them at all. I like TSM's draft. I know they get
Mhm.
Mirage, but that's something they've been really comfortable with. And
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of Stadium, but I mean they get Lightning Rod on this one. If I'm not mistaken, we see TSM there. Is it is it C group? No, it's A group. For this one, we see them get Lightning Rod Lotus Fisher. Really like that. Similar area for the Fisher versus Mirage. And
I think that
then
one in
yeah, I
particular
mean
is their best draft because getting Lotus in the second round is crazy to me. I
exactly.
can't believe it actually fell that far. So yeah, I think that one where it was the Lava Fissure, Lotus, and Lightning Rod, I think it was the three picks. That is definitely their best draft.
Yeah, and I mean even here they get Down Beast, which again I know like you're not as up on, but they got Down Beast, Height, Mirage. I think this is pretty solid and consistent. So I'm
Hmm.
pretty happy with these picks. Let's shift gears here, and we're gonna move into a tier list, and I'll pull this up now. Hopefully it'll show up on screen. It did. Insane. Who said I couldn't use um, we're gonna do a tier list of all of these teams based on their POI draft, their performance in the year, all of these different factors, how they've been performing recently, and kind of chime in and see where they're gonna be. You constructed this tier maker. I don't recognize all the logos, so hopefully I will not screw up too much with those. We're gonna work through what we can and try to get this tier list together. So I'm thinking, unless you have a spot, is there a spot you'd like to start? You think? Should we
I
try
would
to go
just
like
say,
down to
I
the
would say
top, or
real quick, do you want to change anything with the categories? Is that something that you're comfortable with? Because I can kind of explain at least my thinking when I made these tiers, unless you want to change something.
no? Honestly, I mean, I think it makes sense. I think losers round two makes sense. Early exit, yeah. Honestly, no, I'm kind of good with how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So for the people, basically how my thought process was is your top contenders are basically teams that you're locking in to be favorites to win land. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Top 10 is not necessarily like where they'll finish in the top 10, but like teams that should be in that top 10, whether it's three or four teams or five or six teams, teams that definitely like that is their a very big capability for them. Finals is again very simplistic, just teams that I think could or should make finals. That's more probably the should make finals because the losers round two, I kind of see it as teams that either could fall into finals or like barely just make finals or fall out in that second losers bracket. And then the early exit is just the teams that probably will be, a 2 day and they're out of here. Just be, a lot of it is just based on, we have so many top tier teams.
yeah,
Even these teams that are going to be 31st through 40th are going to be very, very quality teams. It's just that when you run into so many other good teams in the world, they kind of get down more in that
exactly.
area versus, in their particular region, they might be more of a top 10, but just in the world, they might be a little bit more down the list. So,
Right. Yeah. Honestly, I think we just dive in. I'm just gonna start picking them out,
yeah,
um, and then we'll just put them where we think. If you have a
works
little
for me.
thoughts on them at all, we can chime in. Shadow, I think
Hmm.
not for. We'll start with Shadow. Not for nothing. They made it. What do we say? 11th place last time.
So they got 22nd
22nd.
at the split two playoffs. So definitely a team that had a very good showing. Again, was it that specific meta? You never know.
All right.
But I
This is
think
made it
just
final.
based, but again, they made it very close to making the finals.
Yeah.
So I would think they're very capable of being a losers round two team, potentially sneaking their way in. So I
Yeah.
think where you got them would be good for me. Unless you had any other
Yeah,
thoughts.
and I think that the meta then was really complemented the way that they're I mean I've heard like it said that both of the China, like most of the Chinese invite teams, tend to be more on the aggressive side,
Hmm.
um, and I think that meta serviced it better than maybe this does. And
Yeah.
so I'm not. I have again. I haven't seen enough of them playing in the current meta to really chime in too much on this. But I think that based on just the metas and how I've seen them play prior, I think that losers round two probably makes a little more sense. I don't know that the way they played before is going to get them to finals, but I feel comfortable there.
Yeah.
For Ninjas in Pajamas, this is a team that historically, right? We can be like, this is a team. They make it to finals. They're top 10. They've been contenders, right? That has not been the recent experience, and they've struggled a lot. And there's been a lot of factors for that. But ultimately, I mean, you were saying it earlier. I don't know that this is a team that is getting top 10. I would still put them in finals. I think they make it to finals.
Hmm.
I think that they're trying a different play style that I think is going to help them a lot, and I think they are playing out of POIs that are not going to get them in a lot of trouble. If they get the good placement points that they need, I think that they could easily go into finals. I don't think they're going to be winning any lobbies, but I think that this could be a team that I think I'd be shocked if they didn't make it to finals.
Yeah, if I had to pick one or the other, I definitely think that we could probably put them maybe about that, 16th to 20th, making
Yeah,
finals. I think, like I said, I think that losers round two, you might even be able to put this if you want to, but losers round two could almost be losers round two slash barely make finals. Like if
yeah,
people want to think about it more that way. So I definitely think if I had to pick only one or the other, I would say barely making finals.
yeah.
But they are kind of in that tier of like, it wouldn't be surprised to see them, be like the 15th qualified team, or if they end up being like 25th and they barely miss on finals, like somewhere in that range. I
Yeah.
think it's pretty good. It's pretty
Yeah,
good.
I think that's good. Yeah, we can keep it finals for now. It's just like 10 spots, right? I think if we do this right,
Yeah,
it should be 10, 10, 10, and then like
like
7,
five
3
or
maybe
four
or
and
something.
five
Yeah.
and six, something like that. Yeah, we
Something
can
like
we can figure that out at the
that.
end.
For FaZe Clan, this is a team that I mean, they were doing well, but I don't feel like I've seen them do much recently. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
probably say maybe finals, maybe losers round two. I'm kind of in this area as well for them. I feel like they're in a similar boat to Ninjas in Pajamas, maybe actually a little bit more proven than Ninjas in Pajamas recently.
So I'm going to be honest. I think they might be more losers round two, or potentially even top tier of early exit.
Really?
I I just think their form right now, and it really is just basing off of a long stretch of time. They had struggles to split two playoffs. They didn't make it out of the first day, yeah, they didn't make it out of losers round
Right.
one. And even in BLGS, watching BLGS, they did end up figuring out a way to kind of regain some form in the end. They ended up finishing sixth in the EMEA region, but we know, kind of looking at all the teams, EMEA is a little bit on the weaker side right now in just
Right.
terms of depth. So when they come to these bigger lands related to the alliances of the world, the Auroras in the past that kind of performed well, where a lot of the other teams have kind of struggled to really get into that top 10 range. Um, so if I had to pick one, I'd probably say more if it loses round two. But if we ended up putting them in like early exit, it could be lose round one. But losers, I mean, based off what you said, I'm fine with losers round two.
Yeah, and maybe it's a little bit of like because if I remember correctly, they were outperforming Ninjas in Pajamas in Split 2 the season. And maybe I'm
Hmm.
taking a little bit more of that from versus their actual like performance and land. So yeah, I think I'm comfortable with that in losers round two. If we want to
Yeah.
rediscuss it and move them to early exit, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
ExoClan, I I have not really gotten to admittedly not to see as much of them. You obviously you're here for a reason because you've been a lot more in touch with some of these teams recently. I've been watching, the past few weeks of scrims, but I missed some things. Um where are you feeling about ExoClan?
So I think with ExoClan, I would say with this meta, a lot of teams that have done well have been teams that can play zone, but they do a really good job of defending their spot. And I think EXO fits the zone part of it, but I think the defending their spot part is where they've struggled quite a bit. They got 14th in the regional final of BLGS. which again, is not the end all be all by any means. But I also know that really outside of the Sports World Cup this year, which we kind of all know is kind of had its own rules and kind of played out a little bit differently than
Right.
what we'd think. They didn't necessarily have the best year. And I don't really see anything that's going to change my opinion right now. I do think they are like, they definitely could be a team. Like if they made a finals as like the 18th or 19th team, it wouldn't surprise me because I think Case Swinney definitely deserves his flowers along with Slayers and Fuda. Is a very solid roster. I just don't think this meta necessarily has fit them the best. And so for me, I'd probably put them more in the losers round 2 type area.
Yeah. Would you say towards the top or the bottom here?
I'd probably put more towards the bottom, at least if I compare them to the other 2 teams, just based off of recent form. So I'd probably say at the bottom of those 3 for right now. Yeah.
Okay. Going up next, we'll hit Energy. I'd put them in. I'd put them at least in finals. I could see an argument for top 10. They are easily playing as a potentially top 10 team. I mean,
yeah.
But the thing is that they haven't. Nocturnal has proven in the past to be able to be a contending team, but we haven't seen any of that recently, and so I don't know how much of this is just a bias towards very recent bias. I don't know if he can translate that, and that's where I'm not sure. I definitely want to believe that. I'd love to see Nocturnal at the top. I think I'd be teetering between finals and top 10.
Yeah, I think for me, they are 100% for me a locked top 12 or 13 team in the world right now.
That's what
I think
say, yeah.
based off of what I've been watching, Guild has made the transition to playing Gibby, and his shotgun is a lot better than I thought it would translate to, just because we obviously know M&K shotgun just typically is better just based on the inputs, right, and how it's a little bit easier to play in shotgun play. But he has translated very well to that role, and I think he's going to be their X factor. We all know how good Guild is. Controller players obviously thrive a lot more in an SMG meta, but I think the way he's performed with shotguns right now, I think he's their ace in the hole, and that I think the way that he plays is where this team's going to go, because I think fun FPS gives you a very good level of consistency, and I think on the big stage, Nocturnal does tend to IGL very well. Obviously, there's been some mix-ups in the past, but a lot of that I think came to roster construction versus necessarily how he did. Right. So I think for me, if I had to pick one, it's 100% finals with a team that definitely has the capabilities to even for a top 5 for me personally on the right day. But I would lock them in as probably my top of finals. Right. We'll obviously see what other teams come in, but I think they're if they got top 10 or top 5, it would not shock me at all. Even if they won, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. But a top 5, top 10 is very, very obtainable for that roster.
Yeah, I'm gonna move that into 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves, I feel like they're in the same boat as NIP in terms of I see it as 15th, 16th. I think they're definitely going to make it to finals, but I think that they have, we can't neglect their POI draft, which was, they're going to be struggling on Storm Point, but they have some good POIs that they are comfortable out of. They were doing really bad for a while, but now, this past week, they've gotten a couple of really good matches in. They've done a lot better this week than I've seen them do previously. But right now this is a team that could be, this team could almost be early exit to top contender. This literally is the biggest wild card team I've seen. I would be more inclined to put them in finals, but I don't know. Where are you thinking with that? Or do we need to add a wild card tier?
Honestly, it honestly might even just be called the 100 Thieves category, because we definitely can add one, just have a wild card if you want to, because I think that could easily fit 1 or 2 teams, because I know there's another team that's probably going to go into that category. But yeah, the thing with 100 Thieves is I think on paper, they're a team that easily could be a top 10, just purely based on the players that they have. It's just right now the communication that they have amongst the 3 of them just does not flow well from day to day. And especially when you have, you're going to have group stages on one day, then you have group stages the next day, and then you have bracket play the next day. The teams that are the most consistent are the ones that are always going to find themselves in finals lobbies. It only takes one bad day for you to go from bracket stages down to the losers bracket, and then losers bracket to going home.
Yep.
You have to be on top of your game going into this, and right now it's just they go from a top 5 in a scrims to a bottom 5 or a middle of the road kind of scrim day. And then even in BLGS, obviously some of that had to do with Jen Burn not being there. I want to say definitely big shout out to Rambo for how well he filled in considering the situation. But I think personally for me, 100 Thieves just 100% fits that wild card. If you just purely base it on the players, I think we'd be dumb not to put them in a minimum top 10. But I
Yeah,
think when you just take into every factor when it comes to the POIs and the communication and the macros and all that stuff, it's 100% a wild card. You just don't know where they're going to end up at.
yeah. I'm gonna hit some more rapid fire ones.
Yep.
Give me your quick thoughts.
Yes.
Oblivion.
I think early exit for me. I think that just unfortunately the firepower is not quite there. And I think with a team that's going to have a bunch of random POIs that they're playing from them day to day, it's very tough to plan for that many. So I think early exit for them.
Eternal. I'm also thinking probably on the early exit.
I think early exit as well. I think again, kind of same category as Oblivion. Earthnal has had a little bit more success because I believe they were at Split 2 playoffs if I remember correctly, or they might have just been a wild card team. But regardless, I know they've had a little bit more success. But I think overall wise, I think they're just going to be a team that will probably fall in that same category as Oblivion, where too many different POIs, not really enough firepower. So I think that's where they belong.
Okay. BK Gaming.
So this is my personal pick. I think they could be a top 10. I think for this particular, since we're not in a crypto meta, I'm fine with putting them underneath NRG in finals. But I think personally for me, VK Gaming is a team that if they get another top 10, I would not be surprised. I just think their macro and their rotations have been very good. Again, in scrims, which I know it's just scrims. I understand that doesn't always mean everything, but they are a team that consistently pops up, usually performing quite well. And again, when they performed a little bit better towards the end of the year, because I think even believe when I'm looking at BLGS again, just with based off of the most recent form we have, where are they at? There we go. They did pretty well during BLGS, if I remember. I don't have their exact placement, but their IGL Casa, I think I'm very highly rating. You know, they got a top 10 at Split 2, so they've done it before. So I think they're finals team for me.
Yeah. Meteor. Which I think this is
Yeah. So pretty interesting to kind of see where they end up at. Again, Libel Ace, if you don't know who that is, you'll definitely get to know them probably by the end of this. They were the LCQ team from APAC North.
Yep.
They finished second in BLGS in the regional final. So they're not a team to sleep on.
No.
They were playing Horizon, Pathfinder, Gibby in regional finals. So if it tells you anything about they are ready to play, they will fight anybody. They've even been doing that on terrible ping. If I had to guess, I'd probably say a losers round 2 is probably where they fit for me personally.
Yeah. Somewhere towards
but
the top.
yeah, but I think again, like this could be a team that if they end up going out and loses round 1, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me just because they're a team that they're kind of the exact opposite of the zone team where they have to be on top of their fighting and they have to be very good in their team fights because otherwise they'll struggle quite a bit. So
yeah.
I think anywhere in that losers round 2 is probably good for them for now.
E36.
So for me, I think based off of this meta and the things that I've seen, I think they would be an early exit for me. I think in other metas, they might be a losers round 2. But I just think that just based off what we've seen, I know they just made finals at Split 2 playoffs.
Right.
But obviously they had the infamous diving on TSM play that a lot of people had some questions about.
Yeah.
But I think just with this meta and kind of what I've seen, I think early exit might be the case for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's valid. Let's do X and Y. Source X and Y. This is, I mean, historically I think X and Y has done very well. They've also had times where they haven't done as well. I'm thinking losers round 2.
So for me, based off of what I've seen when they've been at a LAN, I just don't think that pure fighting bodes well, especially in this meta where it is so hard to like fully wipe teams. So I think personally for me, they might be a losers round 1. Again, if they end up being a losers round 2, it wouldn't surprise me. but I think they might be more mid of the road early exit because I think they even got like 39th or 40th at split 2. And I just don't think outside of their region that playstyle necessarily fits well.
Yeah, that's fair. Trying to get some of these logos, make sure I know. Okay,
For sure.
what logo is this?
That's Stallions.
Oh,
So
makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, let's
So
get Stallions. Let's get Stallions in here. Where you? I could see them being a wild card. Is that
I
because the question is, do we define wild card as like could win it, or are we just saying wild card is like? Because to me, wild card is like there's too many categories to put them in.
Yeah, I think it's too many categories because I respectfully, again, I understand Al's on that team and we have some other good LAN experience guys on that roster, but I don't think anybody's quite expecting them to win this LAN.
Yeah,
But I do think that they could fall anywhere from like the finals to early exit categories, like any of those three.
yeah,
So I think a wild card would probably be pretty good because I think, again, if they're on top of their game, um, Scurvy is a very good anchor player. Crook's a very good IGL. Have had some success on land. Scurvy being a part of the 100 Thieves roster that placed third a couple years back when it was Onmu and Vaxilon. So definitely some experience there. But yeah, I think just a wild card of like they could easily be out on Saturday or they could make finals just depending on how kind of things play out. So yeah, I think that's a good spot for them.
yeah. Reignite.
So this is a roster for those people that don't know. Is the roster has F-Chan. He was on the Pulverex rosters that famously qualified as a duo in one of the rounds during one of the lands, I believe, in year 3. So there's some experience with F-Chan on that roster, but I have some question marks kind of with everybody else on that roster. I know one Sudutaki, I believe, if I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. It's his first LAN. Shunmi, who's also on the roster as well. They've had one finals lobby, I believe, at a LAN. So I'm not as high on them. I think that could probably be an early exit for them. If they made losers round 2, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. But I just don't think, based off the recent success, plus F-Chan being really the only one that has a ton of experience, I think early exit would probably be where they'd be at.
Okay. Who is SN? Which team is that? You're gonna say.
So that is no, you're good. That is Supernova.
Supernova. Right.
So that is the team that qualified as the last chance qualifier out of APAC South.
Okay.
Very surprising how they won. It was a very chaotic end game that they just kind of happened to be the last team that nobody fought. And really kind of struggled regionally lately. They got 18th in the regional final of BLGS. All 3 players, it's their first LAN appearance. I think a very capable, probably of early exit category. I don't really see too much of it, and the play style I don't think really fits too well right now either. So I think that's a good spot for them.
Yep. And we got Dragons. Dragons, right?
Yeah. So Dragons will be an interesting roster because we've already talked about their POI draft. They've really committed to the zone play style, which I believe the analyst Zany, who I've seen around the scene, he has done some good work with. He was with the Asholos Laser roster that had a lot of success. And that was the roster that Karev was on at one point. So there's definitely pieces on that roster.
This is part of that roster, right? Am I wrong?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. So this is, let me find the
I think
players.
it's the 2 of them, and then they picked up IGL from, I don't remember.
I'll got it here in a second. Let me find them real fast. Yeah, so it's Azazel, Panic, and Brutus.
Yes.
Who are all 3 players that have a lot of LAN experience. Azazel is his 6th, Panic is his 4th, and Brutus is his 3rd. And they had all finished in the top 20 at EWC and had some other decent appearances at Split 2 playoffs as well. So I'm very excited to see what this roster can do. They were kind of a team that was already playing a little bit of zone in the crypto meta because they were using like a Newcastle Watson Pathfinder when a lot of people were playing crypto. So definitely a team that I think I would put towards the top of losers round 2. I've got a lot of respect for what they've done this year. And again, I think experienced rosters definitely tend to perform more towards at least that middle ground of like 18th to 20th, 18 to 25th.
Yep.
So I think they are in that case of I think they could definitely be competing for those last couple spots in finals.
Yeah. Team Burger.
So a lot of experience again with this roster, Pricey and Sharky especially.
Yeah.
Sharky is obviously a proven LAN winner. He used to play with Zero for those who don't know. I base this off of purely form recently, I would probably put them more towards losers round 2. But I'm going to put the respect of what they've done on LAN and put them more at the back end of finals.
Yeah,
Again,
I think that's fair.
if they end up being in a losers round 2, or even honestly an early exit situation just based off of form, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. But I'm going to put the respective least of the experience that they've had and put them more towards the back end of finals, just based on the roster that they have.
Yeah, it makes sense. For Noctum.
So again, if you ask me right after Split 2 playoffs, I would have this team almost locked a little bit more towards like a back end finals.
Yeah.
But I think right now I kind of have them as a mid tier losers round 2. With the meta switch, I just don't think it necessarily has fit them as well, and they've struggled a little bit more with some of their placements. And just with watching them during scrims, big thing when I mentioned scrims is just developing good habits and placing rather well, not necessarily winning, but just like showing that you know how to accumulate points over time, because again, that's what group stages is about, right? Is accumulating points over 3 match days. So that's just kind of what I've seen them struggle with a little bit more recently. So they even missed BLGS finals, now that I remember that. So I think just based off of their form and really only having the one LAN appearance at Split 2 playoffs, I think a losers round 2 is probably where they go.
Yeah. For GHS, where are you thinking for them? I mean, obviously, this is a Korean team, right? Or are they just Japanese?
Let me double check. I believe it's a Korean team, but I definitely want to get that right. So I'm just bringing something up just real fast. Just out of respect. Oh, yeah, you're good. I mean, it's just out of respect for the players.
Yeah,
it's a Japanese team.
It's a Japanese team.
We looked that up. Yep. So, but they qualified out of APAC North. Again, one tappy for Rufa.
Yeah, I mean, this is
very experienced roster. Haven't necessarily had like greatest placements all the time. And this meta, I haven't seen anything that's like stood out to be like this is like a for sure fire finals team.
Yeah,
I think I would. They tend to at least compete and show out. Tida's had like I believe been on the Northeption rosters in the past.
And one tappy is Riddle, right?
I believe so. Yeah. So there's definitely the experience there, and definitely want to give them their props on that. What I would probably say would be we'll probably end up rearranging some of these teams there in the middle. I'll probably put them back in finals right now. Again, they might get bumped out with just some other teams I know we have coming up. Yeah. But I think again they kind of follow. Yeah, they kind of come in the part of like back in finals, top and losers round 2. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where they fall in.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would say.
Okay. Let's do Dreamfire. This is obviously they don't have the GOAT Roy with them anymore.
Yeah, they don't have the GOAT Roy. Shout out to Roy. Obviously a very big crowd favorite at past lands. But a team that's very capable. Again, a lot of it was going to base off of their POI draft, which I don't think they did bad. I don't think there was anything like crazy outstanding either. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where it falls. Taking a look here just like recently, haven't really seen anything that stood out too much at scrims. Again, they kind of fall on that middle ground, so where nothing really pops out too much. They struggled a bit in BLGS finals with this meta. Getting 15th in the final. I Hate the World will definitely be which is a crazy name, obviously, by the way, but shout out to him. He definitely will be the kind of the cog that makes the wheel go. If he's fighting well, because I mean, literally watching their VODs, any good meta gun that they find, they're like, here you go. Like they literally just like ping it. He goes and gets it. So like he's the first one of the shotgun, first one of the G7, the Nemesis, whatever you think. He's gonna be the one that makes this go. I mean, he was top 10 in kills at Split 2 playoffs, so he's got the fragging potential there. And as long as they have their capability, because I mean, they got a top 10 in a LAN, 3MZ and Pete. I'm sorry, I know I butchered that, but they got 7th at year 3 champs, so they have the potential to be a top 10 team. But I think that for me, they might be a little bit more of a losers round 2 right now. But if I Hate the World goes on a burner, they easily could be anywhere else. So I would probably put them for me in losers round 2 right now.
Yeah. Is it worth wild card for you, or you think it's?
Not necessarily, because if I've seen a little bit more of their recent form being
Yeah.
better, I'd put them in wild card because like they've shown in the past, obviously. But I think right now, just based off of current, I'm not too high on anything outside of losers round two. But again, if they're a team that pop into finals, would not surprise me.
Cool. Um, yeah. So moving into some of the meat here, let's do go next.
I personally think they're gonna be an early exit team.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same.
I I think their play style is a lot more aggressive. Like they were, for those who don't know, this is not Kashira's
Yeah,
team.
not Kashira's
This
team.
is a different Go Next roster, and they were the two rats, one controller, I believe, at the first split one playoffs.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and they just have some questionable decision making at times, if I'm being honest. Just picking not the best of fights and not rotating the way that they should. And I think just in a meta that is a lot more about rotating and finding the better spot, I just don't think their play style will necessarily align with that goal. So I think an early exit's probably where to go.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. Makers.
So I put Makers as a wild card team for me personally. I think that on the right day, they have shown in their region over in APAC
Oh yeah.
South that they are a top tier team. It's just they have not shown it on LAN yet. It's a very solid roster. Like
Yeah,
I
this is
said, like
former Iron Blood Gaming, right?
I believe so. Like I said, I would have to
Yeah.
look that up further, but
Asia, Dexter, Ziki.
yeah, I'm gonna save everybody the time of not spending 10 minutes trying to look that up. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean they're a very capable team. They've been to 4, 5, and 6 lands respectfully. They've had a top 10. A couple of them have with some other iterations of rosters that they've been on. Um, so they definitely can do it. They got fifth in BLGS in the current meta. And I believe they won 2 of the BLGS qualifiers along the way. So if they have the right form, they're a team that can definitely be finals, even maybe crack a top 10 on the right day. I would say more finals if I had to guess anything. But they
Okay.
also could be a team, I believe they got like 37th or 38th at LAN this year. So that's just where, I think wild card fits them
Cool.
best. You just don't know what you're going to get.
All right, I think we're in the big meat here.
Yeah, saving all the top teams here.
And we probably got
It's
like
gonna be
20-ish minutes to work with this. So let's
yeah, we'll knock it
let's
out.
see. I think let's go Cloud9 because this is someone I think you've had a strong opinion of, and I'll go ahead and say it. I think they could be a top 10.
I think they're going to be a top 10 personally for me. I think what VK Gaming was at Split 2 playoffs, I think what Cloud9 will be.
Yeah.
And even at Split 1 playoffs, they got, I believe, 6th. So
Yeah.
they've shown that this roster can perform. And I think this meta, especially if you watch them on E-District, they have a ton of really good E-District games.
Yes.
So I really think that they're a team that easily could be a top 10. They might even could crack a top 5 if they perform well in finals. I know they haven't necessarily had the best finals appearances, so that's like kind of the last hurdle they need to get over.
Right.
But if there's any meta, I think they could get a top 10 or top 5. It's this one for
Yeah,
sure.
and I mean Shubi is top 2, top 3 Newcastles. So I mean,
Yeah, 100%
there's
agree.
there's that credit to be given to.
Absolutely.
Loan Sharks. I think this is another like it feels top 10, it feels finals. I mean, if history were to repeat itself or a trend was going to continue, 5th to 7th place.
Yeah.
So,
Shout out Wyatt Bab, as we all saw down the Apex
yeah.
spot. They are guaranteed 6th place, basically.
Exactly.
I would put them slightly above Cloud9 for me. I think they are absolutely locked into a top 10.
Yeah,
Again, I would
I
almost
agree.
even lock them in almost to a top 5 if there wasn't some other heavy hitters out there. But again, if Lone Sharks pop up and, if we get to an 8, 9, 10 team match point and they're the ones that win it, it would not shock me at all. I think
Right.
Dropped is due for a LAN win. He's one of the better IGLs that's out there. Yanya and Noct in their own roles. Yanya obviously coming over from Liquid. Him and Drop have really developed a good chemistry IGLing, and they've placed very well recently in all the BLGS events. So they're a team that easily could be a top contender if it wasn't for some other teams. But I think that you'd be absolutely stupid to not consider them as a potential LAN winner this go around.
Okay. I think this is going to be a contentious one. Orgulous and Hungry. Hear me out. I think that this could be, I think, bottom of finals.
I think they're straight up a wild card team.
That's
You don't know what you're gonna
also
get from a top A. Like it's
fair.
respect to him. Like
Fair. No,
he
no
definitely should.
arguments.
I'll just say this real quick. He definitely earned a little bit more respect for me
Oh
at
yeah.
this past land. I know that they obviously crashed out a bit in the elimination brackets, but they definitely showed some
I mean, they dominated one of
potential.
those that one group
Yeah.
stage.
I think their biggest issue is that if they can stick to a zone play style, especially in this meta, I think they could potentially contend for a finals this time around and finally kind of break through his, his stigma that he has. But I just think right now, like if you put them anything outside of wild card or early exit, I just think that you might be drinking the Navi Kool-Aid of
That's
split two playoffs. So
that's fair. That's
yeah,
fair.
but again, very, very capable team. We just need to see it.
Yeah,
That's kind of
100%.
just at the end of the day. So
Yeah, and let's go into Furia now. I think Furia has I feel like Furia in the previous metas with Pathfinder was amazing. I haven't seen them show up at the same level in this meta.
yeah, I would agree. I think that honestly, for me right now, I'd put them mid finals. It's a team I think probably below VK. I think they absolutely should be a top 10 team based on I know how good Keon is, how good Madness can be as an IGL, how good Vaxlon is on the Newcastle, even though they've kind of been experimenting on who's doing what recently. Um, I just think that for some reason there's just something that's holding that roster back of being what they probably could be capable of.
Right.
If we didn't already have 4 or 5 wild cards, I would say they probably would be a wild card. But
Yeah.
I want to give them a little bit
Yeah, I think finals, anything short of finals would be surprising to me.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think they missed finals at split one, and they got like 19th. I think at split two, maybe 18th, something like that. But I think again, it's a roster that's very capable of competing at the top 10 level. It's just we need to see it.
Yeah. I think this is a good one. Let's talk about former legends. It is oh man. It is Primus Commanda. I didn't want to say that name. This is still Strafing Flame. This is Player K. This is Arctic, right? Which Arctic was formerly FaZe. So
correct.
I mean, this is a solid team. Let's not knock the fact Tyler's their sub. Saying.
Yeah. Right.
Tyler the goat, the unsigned goat. Give that man, please. Somebody pick that man up.
100%.
Jesus, this is a hard team to deny like top 10 in my opinion. I know that they've struggled. They haven't been the most consistent. I would say at least
so,
but I don't know. Yeah, let's hear
I will. Sorry. I will say for me, I am a huge Strafing Flame guy.
Yeah.
When TSM was looking for an IGL, that was the guy I wanted them to make it happen because I have a ton of respect for him. I just think there's a lot going on with that team, with Arctic obviously playing in EU, with Player K and Strafing Flame splitting up with Easy Flash.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's this. He is actually signed to Heroes, which they went crazy in the I think BLGS finals. I think they ended up getting like second, which I think they had scored the most points, but they were easily one of the best rosters during that BLGS.
Sense, wherever he's at.
But no, he was insane. But back to PK, I think personally for me, just with this iteration of the roster, I think they're a losers round 2 team.
Wow. I'll respect your pick there. I'll respect it.
I really want to put them in finals again, just based off of the past that Strafing Flame and Player K have had. And again, if they end up making finals, I would not be so shocked by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that, especially with all these other teams we have coming up, I mean, we haven't even mentioned half of probably the top 10 teams.
We're gonna have to start sliding some people.
Yeah, I just think that PK right now their roster is just not the same one that we saw.
Yeah,
even in 6-7 months ago. So
fair enough. Cool. I think for Guild, goes. It's gonna start getting tight here. I think Guild goes finals. I think Guild is maybe like I'd put Guild above Burger, but Guild probably above NIP.
I would slide them. I would honestly, for me, I would slide Guild This is this
I'd
could be
maybe
good
above
stuff.
Fury, honestly.
I would say based off consistency, I would say above Fury because I want to give Phony his flowers.
Yeah.
Obviously, coming off the recent land win, and plus that roster, they were, I believe, the old Serenity roster. I believe is
Yeah.
what they were named. They had gotten 10th, I believe, at Split One playoffs.
Yep.
And also performed very well with Empty.
Yep.
When he was IGLing, which is really funny that they basically just switched
Yeah. Swap
those two
IGLs,
teams, but yeah, I think that they're for sure fire finals team.
Yeah.
I think again this meta with it being a zone meta, it fits very well for Phony the way he IGLs. They're really their top end is just again they're kind of in the group of can they defend their spot when it matters most.
Yeah.
And that's just gonna be their ultimate question where I think it kind of stops them from being like in the top 10, like 100% consideration. But again, if they're a team, there's 10 or so match point teams. Would not surprise me if they're in, if they're in one of those teams.
Yeah. All right. We got about 10 minutes. We got about 10 things. So let's try to,
Yeah,
let's see what we got here.
Rapid fire here.
Crazy Raccoon. I'm thinking low finals, like middle finals, maybe.
So I'd say based off of their recent form, they won BLGS over in APAC North. I think for me, they are a sneaky top contender. I think that roster is back.
I got you.
I think that St. June and Obley have proven it on a land stage. They're going to be in their region, and I think that for me, they are the back end of top contenders for me.
Okay.
So,
Aurora. I think I honestly, personally, I'd put them high up top 10.
I would say right there, based off of how they've recently played, I would say that's where they fall in because they performed very well recently.
I don't know if they committed to the Mirage or not, but I'm down for it.
I think they probably will, but I think a top 10 would be good for them, and I would say move Crazy Raccoon up to top contender. I think they'll be the back end of that. Is my personal opinion.
Top contender. Sorry, I just forgot that was the name of that category.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, Virtus Pro. I mean, this is oh my gosh, I'm blanking on
Zach Mazer.
Zach, thank you. This is Zach's team. I haven't gotten to keep tracks on a lot of them, but I've heard they've done pretty well. I mean,
I would say right now they would be. This is tough. I would say right now that they would be slightly above NIP. I think just based on, I think if you just kind of compare those teams head to head, I think Virtus Pro with Lou coming in very, very solid.
He's had a good year.
And as much as people dogged on Slayer before, I think he is a very solid player.
Yeah.
So I think they could easily make a finals. And Zach's teams have proven in the past, that they can make finals lobbies.
Yeah, more than fair. Can't argue with that. Okay. LG. I mean, this is I feel like this is a top 10 team. I think they're playing pretty solid. I don't think they're at their best form. But I think for them, their best form isn't, is pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, their best form on paper is easily a top 10. I think if we consider everything that's going on with that roster right now, I would slide them in under NRG in finals because, again, I think they should make finals. I think Split 2 playoffs was a fluke, and they shouldn't be missing finals. If they do again, then that roster, I think, easily will obviously will probably be splitting up after missing 2 finals in a row. But I think we need to respect the players that are on that and their capabilities of when they've been at their best. Because I think it's a little bit different from 100 Thieves because obviously they've had a little bit longer time to play together, so there's a little bit more things that they've worked out. So I think finals would be good for them.
Okay, let's talk about Game and Gladiators. Yeah, I mean, I think this is. I think they're here, but I don't know. They haven't done as well recently, so maybe they are a little bit lower in your eyes. I mean,
for me, honestly, right now, I will give them the respect of what they've done this year and still put them above VK and just underneath LG. But
I think
talk about a team that has turned on its head for, unfortunately, the opposite end. We'll have to see if they can make the adjustment. Again, if there's any team that could probably do it, they're one of them since they've proven it on land. But I am a little worried about how they're playing recently.
Yeah, I won't dwell on it, but I do think that one of the biggest reasons that they did so well is because, I mean, not to knock their own, they're very good, but I think they also benefited a lot from jumping on a meta with Newcastle before anyone else, and that gave them a huge leg up in that tournament. But there was also, obviously a lot of other factors. Complexity,
Yeah.
I think complexity is like top of top 10. I think complexity's been doing really well. I mean, I could hear an argument for lower, but I think this is a team that's been performing pretty well.
I would definitely say I'd probably put them at top end of finals. I think we just need to see it because obviously they did very well at split two. I think they have a
Yeah.
very good chance of easily being top 10. It's just that we've only seen it once, and with obviously losing the Lou, bringing an enemy, how does that look at a land setting? Again, I think they very easily could be top 10 and repeat their performance
Yeah.
from split two. But I think just without seeing it more than once, and obviously they did very well during BLGS. But I think right now I'd put them in that energy category, the LG kind of category right now.
Yeah. I think that's definitely fair. We'll keep them there for now. All right, we got Liquid. I think a hot
I
take
think
maybe.
honestly, to save yourself time and
If
probably speeding this up, I think all six of these teams are contenders, in my opinion. I
I
think that this is the most
That's what I
open
was gonna say.
end,
Yeah.
no idea who's going to win champs. I think that we're potentially ever going to have just
Yeah.
based on the meta and based on just how teams have been elevating their performances over the year. Just year four obviously has been the year of new winners with Alliance and Reject Winity and with SSG with Phony. Um, I just think that honestly we could have legitimately seven contenders in my opinion. Um,
Yeah.
Honestly, you could put them in whatever order you
I
want
think
to,
I think just to be
but
fair, I think Liquid's a top contender, but I think to be fair, we should move these two to down.
okay,
I feel because I feel like these five are like a league in their own right now in terms of
okay.
quality. I mean, maybe arguably Fnatic could be top 10 just because we haven't like they're always there, but they're not.
I just want to say it on the record. I had the seven teams in the top contenders. I see what you're doing, so like I'm not going to argue with it. If you want to, if anything, I would probably say Fnatic and Crazy Raccoon would be top 10, and I would say the other five teams just based off of recent
Yeah,
performances.
yeah, I would agree with
Um,
that. Okay, yeah, yeah, I'd go with that.
but I do think right now, for me personally, I think um, Moist and Alliance could be one and two, which either way. I think, in my personal opinion, I think the way I've watched Moist play, they just, if they're on, there's really not too many other teams that can match the firepower. And then you put in a strong IGL like Empty, that there seems to be less friction in that relationship like there was in the previous roster. I think personally for me, Alliance and Moist are those two teams. Um, and again, if you put Moist first, they're that's who I'm picking to win. But if Alliance wins, if TSM wins, if Liquid wins, I mean, again, if literally
Yeah,
almost any of those top 10 teams win, like it would not surprise me at all. I would say TSM's probably fifth on that category. If we're gonna include them in the top contenders, I honestly wouldn't even mind since we haven't seen TSM win. If we even put a Fnatic or a Crazy Raccoon in that top contenders and put TSM in that top 10, again, I still think personally for me those seven teams could be top contenders. But until we see TSM, actually win, because I think they struggle in like a match point setting to like close out a match point setting. They've obviously been good in getting a top five at this most recent land, but it's just getting that last match point win that kind of puts you over the top. I wouldn't mind putting TSM at top of top 10 and maybe sliding one of Fnatic or Crazy Raccoon into the top contenders, in my opinion.
that's fair. I was gonna say I think Liquid. This is like it all has come together for this team, and I think this is a
Mm-hmm.
team that could definitely um do it. they they've put it together in BLGS. That's a different format. Still, they did really good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like I could move. I could see them going down just because like there is still a little bit of like land performance as a team, but still I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna kind of give them the credit. Falcons obviously they'll always just be there. They
Yeah, they
haven't
have to be.
they
They have
haven't
to be.
had the recency to necessarily like lock in like the number one pick for a lot of people, but still they have to
Correct.
be there. Alliance has been the most consistent team the entire year,
All year.
and
Yep.
they're never outside of earshot of getting that. Moist, obviously, you're putting two of the most recent land winners with MT, amazing IGL. They're playing together amazingly. I think TSM. I will put them lower. I think TSM has the best shot of winning this LAN. In
Yeah.
my opinion, I think TSM is the most poised to win this LAN. I think they are in the best shape I've seen them. I think that Verholst Rampart is one of the best meshed like player to character combinations I've seen in a while, along with like Shubi Newcastle. I think even Nicewig was talking about this. Like insanely picked up the character that I think Talmadge as their coach is doing a fantastic job in like putting those pieces together. And I think Zap's doing an amazing job IGLing. Reps is just doing what he always does best. You know, he's a kingmaker. And I think that this feels like the land, like they were, you know, one grief away from winning the previous LAN. And like arguably they could have won it. Alliance, same exact boat. Both of those teams could have won it. TSM, they did let me piece together how split one. Oh my god, I'm so anyway, they I'm like everything's a blur now. This
You're
is
good.
a team that's like they've been finding their form throughout time, and I feel like they've locked that in. And so I'd say confidently I would put them here, I think. And I think if I were being honest, I'd put Alliance ahead of Moist.
Yeah, I mean, it's like up on your channel. So if you want to do, if you want to do Alliance first,
like,
by all means, I'm not going to argue with you. So
down in the lower ranks, I'm struggling, but I think like I could see like if I'm putting stats on the board, I got Alliance winning. If I'm like putting, you know, recent performance, like land performance and consistency, putting those things together, I've got Moist. But if I'm like just my gut's telling me is that TSM's gonna win. That's what my gut's telling me. Falcons could obviously take it. I would love to see Liquid take it. It would be amazing to see Fnatic or Crazy Raccoon take it. Especially Fnatic in Japan would go nuts. Any of those top 10 I'd love to see take it, but I think this is where it makes sense to me. And I think we have a pretty good tier list here. I think we did pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. It's I mean, really 1 through 12, honestly, with how things have gone. I think again 1 through 3 or 4 is probably a cut above everybody else, but then you know, really everybody else, it's kind of in that 5 to 12 if they end up winning the LAN. Would not shock me by any means. It's gonna be a fun one to say the least, and I could not be more excited to watch. So I think overall it's a pretty decent list
for you and for everybody listening. Comment and you let me know over under 8.5 matches and match point. Do you think it's gonna be end over under 8.5? You guys can just comment over or under on there.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's always a fun one, isn't it?
Yeah. I think I'm taking.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think I'm taking the over.
I think I'm taking the over. Honestly, I think if you put the over under at 10.5, I still might take the over. I think with this meta, it's just so wide open, and how I mean we're seeing 18 teams sometimes on E-District final zones almost. Like who the heck knows who's going to win those games like that? So it's going to be an interesting one. And like I said, I mean anybody from Alliance, Moist, TSM, Falcons, Liquid, Fnatic, Crazy Raccoon, Lone Sharks. I mean any of those teams. Easy, you can make an argument for a top contender. So I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. So hope you guys enjoy the LAN. Make sure you like and comment if you haven't already. Who you think's gonna win? If you have your own opinion on that, and then subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise, Donny. And for you guys,
absolutely.
We'll see you in the next one.